So we have a lot to process through our bodies sometimes, don't we? We've been talking this month about the body, about all the different ways that we experience and engage our bodies, and how that body is also a spiritual instrument. Your body is the one thing that is completely and intimately yours. And so rather than engaging in a spirituality that ignores the body, what we're going to talk about today is a spirituality that engages the body. How many people grew up thinking that spirituality was something separate from the body? Yeah, I think most of us, huh? That was very much, and to be spiritual means to focus on something else, something outside of yourself, right? But I want to say to you now that our bodies are a spiritual instrument and that every body is a good body. Does anybody ever sort of compare their bodies to other people's bodies? And sort of think somebody else has a better body than I have? Yeah, that's kind of the culture that we live in, isn't it? But here is the truth that I want you to take into yourself today. Your body is your perfect spiritual instrument, whatever it looks like and however it feels. It is your instrument. And that by loving the body that you're in, and by contemplating and thinking about how your body communicates with you, it is an opportunity to connect more deeply with spirit. So sometimes I know we think about that mind-body connection, right? That's something people talk about a lot now, right? Mind-body connection, and often it comes up in the context of illness sometimes, right? We know that our thoughts and our feelings can influence our body, and we know that our bodies can be trying to tell us something that we don't really know how to understand or interpret. Let's see, I think I'm, excuse me, a little bit behind my slides. I got caught up in my ritual, but that was the image that went with that, right? Us together in our heart. But we are going to go on. So Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind, tells us, if the spirit or divine intelligence has seen fit to give us a physical body, it would be absurd to think of the body as an illusion, unworthy of our attention. Rather, we should think of the body as a spiritual instrument now. So this was our founder 100 years ago, anticipating some of the many things we have learned at this time about that nature of that connection, and affirming something even more important, right? That our body is also spiritual. So one of the foundational principles in Science of Mind is that everything is God, right? So unlike some faith traditions where the idea is that God created everything out of nothing and then is separate from that creation, in our teaching, we take a different view. We say that God created everything out of itself, and what that means is that God is immanent, what means present in all of its creation. That means including you and including everything that you can see and touch. And we also say that God is transcendent, so it is bigger than us. And that metaphor that Mary used of the ocean in her prayer is an apt metaphor for that, which is to say, we as individualizations and expressions of God are like drops of water in the ocean, but the ocean is much bigger than all of us. So in that same way, God is immanent, present here, and transcendent. And what that means for what we're talking about this morning is that it is immanent in our body, right? In our mind, in our soul, in our body. So the wisdom of spirit is present at every level of our being. And part of our opportunity as living human beings is to learn how to understand that wisdom, that presence, and to recognize it, whether we experience it through our thoughts or our feelings or through the body. The design of our body is amazing, isn't it? Really down to the atomic level. Incredible systems are happening. Incredible vibrations are happening at the atomic level, at the cellular level, at the organ level, right? All the multiple systems, all happening without us having to think about it. You know, what an incredible engineer a spirit is, right? It's going to take a long time. As much as science and medicine is learning about these incredible systems, we know there is still so much more to understand. And one of the things that we're really coming to understand is also how plastic these systems are, right? Things can change and they can be influenced by our own understanding of them. So the more that we can engage this understanding of our body, the more that we can experience the mystery of the divine and to move into a harmonious and fulfilling life. I want to do a little experiment with us this morning. And you can let me know if this works or not. I haven't tried it with a group of people, so you are my guinea pigs. This is science, spiritual science in action. So one of the things we're going to explore a little bit this morning is the idea of how we connect to the body. How many people here are incredibly busy and plan out everything that they do? Some people, huh? I mean, I have a schedule for when I get up, when I'm going to eat, when I'm going to drink water, you know, all the things that I forget. And do I necessarily think about, do I wake up when I'm ready? Do I go to sleep when I'm tired? Do I eat when I'm actually hungry? Or do I do it because, oh, well, it's breakfast time now. It's lunchtime now. Oh, it's time to go to bed now. I'm not checking in with my body. I have a plan because I'm going to be efficient. Anybody else doing that? So I'm going to offer a counterpoint to that by suggesting that today, and maybe this week, we'll talk a little bit more about that, we take a moment to check in with what's going on in our body. So I'm just going to strike the bowl once, and I'm going to do it a couple more times during our talk this morning. And I'm just going to ask you in that moment, when you hear the bell, to just do a little internal scan and see if you can become aware of anything your body wants to tell you right now. Okay, everybody ready? This is the first one. Okay. So just note whatever you observed. And don't worry if you didn't feel like you observed anything. This takes practice, but just kind of put that to the side now. So part of what we want to talk about is the idea of how we make those connections. And another way to think about the body, another metaphor, reality, maybe on a spiritual level, is to also recognize that we are basically vibration, right? The entire universe is an energetic system, and the manifest world is operating at one vibration, and the spiritual world is operating at a higher vibration, is kind of how we conceptualize that. But it's all vibration. So just as the bell or the bowl, when I strike the bowl, it expresses a vibration, so are our bodies vibrating at different levels. And that's part of the awareness of the body, is not just, well, how does my stomach feel or my head feel or whatever part we might have thought of, but also kind of what is my vibration? Is it low today? Am I feeling kind of depressed and sad? Is it higher? I'm feeling more energetic or looking forward to something. I came across a story recently that kind of illustrates some of this idea of how the body communicates things to us. And it was a story about that a woman recounted about an experience that she had when she was about 11 years old. She was reading a book one night in her bedroom, and she was suddenly overcome by this sense of pain in her stomach and her chest. And as she was feeling this feeling, an image of her grandmother came into her mind. And she was very close to her grandmother. They spent a lot of time together. And she jumped up and ran out to tell her mother about this feeling that she was having. And she found her mother just getting off the phone. She had just been speaking with the girl's aunt, and the girl's aunt had just informed her that the mother seemed to have had a heart attack and they were going to go to the hospital. So the mother and her daughter got into the car, drove to the hospital. By the time they got there, the grandmother was stable, but needed more care than could be offered at that small hospital that did not have a cardiologist. So the paramedics bundled the grandmother into the ambulance for a 15, 20-minute drive to this larger medical center. And they instructed the mother and the daughter to follow the ambulance. And so they all started off, and as they were driving, the mother kind of fell back a little bit from the ambulance, which was going a little faster. And again, the daughter was overcome by this feeling, and she urged her mother to drive faster and catch up with the ambulance. And the mother said, no, everything's fine. But no, the daughter was very insistent. So they drove faster, and as they caught up to the ambulance, they could see, and some ambulances kind of have a window in the back that you can see through. They could see that the paramedics were actually working on the grandmother. They were giving her CPR. So clearly she was having another emergency. They got to the hospital, and the grandmother was taken immediately to have surgery. And fortunately, the surgery was successful, and she lived for a number of years after. But what's instructive in the story, of course, is that her granddaughter was connected, wasn't she? And that was a connection through what we call intuition. Right? So it was not a connection through conscious reasoning. Nobody called her, nobody informed her online or with a text. She felt it. She felt it energetically because she was connected to her grandmother. And the story had a happy ending, fortunately. Has anybody here ever had a feeling like that? A feeling that something was wrong? And then found out later that it was somebody that you had some connection to, and you might not be aware of it might not be something as direct as this was, where this young girl got the image of her grandmother, but it's somebody that you had a connection to, and you didn't really know how you could know this, except that you did, right? There are a lot of different kinds of intuition. Sometimes intuition is based on observation, right? We can derive intuition as we read people's body language and affect, or kind of read the room or the dynamics of what's going on. And that's also intuition, because it requires discernment to be able to interpret it. And I would argue that that discernment is spiritual. But sometimes that intuition arrives through other means that we cannot completely understand. And that's part of that mystery of what is that divine connection that we have in the oneness, right? That is also part of our teaching. Major principle of our teaching is that we believe in the direct revelation of truth through our intuitive and spiritual natures, and that anyone may become a revealer of truth who lives in contact with the indwelling God. So that means that ability, that discernment, is available to everybody. It's not just something for spiritual specialists. It's not just something for practitioners or ministers or gurus or whatever the teachers and leaders of other faith traditions may be. This is something that is available to you because you are a human being, and the divine has endowed you with that. So what's really important to remember here is that you don't have to look outside of yourself for knowledge and information. I'm not saying it's not useful and worthwhile, and there isn't a lot to be gained from that, but that you can turn within to receive the lessons that are particularly important for you. And that one of the ways that you can do that is through the body. And with that, So in this moment, consider the possibility that you might think of your body as an antenna. And that one of your choices, if your body is an antenna, is what station you want to tune into. There are a million stations out there, aren't there? On the AM scale, on the FM scale, and now, of course, we have all sorts of other ways. But you have choice to tune in where you want to. And I think it's really important in the world in which we live, where so much competes for our attention, to think about where you want to tune in your antenna. Right? So, for myself personally, I'd like to tune into the divine station, which, oh gosh, is already in me. I don't have to pay an extra monthly fee for it. It's really great. Intuition. So, let me ask, are you in the habit of listening to your body or dismissing it? How many people have dismissed something that their body told them? And did you think when that happened, darn, I could have paid attention? Yeah, I sure have done that. And when that happens, sometimes it's because you think, well, my mind knows better. I don't have to listen to my body because my mind knows better. That's not always the case, is it? Or, have you ever listened and taken action? Yeah, a few people, huh? How did it feel when you took that action? Good. Really good. Okay. I think one of the challenges that we have, partly because we just don't learn how to do this when we're kids, is that we don't trust our bodies, right? We don't feel like our bodies are always very trustworthy teachers or indicators. I can say for myself, as an incredibly clumsy kid, who was always the last kid picked for the team, right? I did not have very much confidence in my body to do anything. Forget about tell me anything. And I would say it's taken me a long time to begin to realize that my body has a lot to say to me, and not just negative things, right, but positive things too. What keeps us from listening to the wisdom of our bodies? What gets in the way? So I've just named a couple of things, right? Lack of trust is one thing that might get in the way. Another thing that might get in the way is sort of not knowing how to speak the language of the body, right? Sometimes it feels sort of like it's a stranger. It's speaking a foreign language. I mean, you're right there with it, but it's speaking a foreign language and you don't know what that means. So, you recognize that you have tension in the pit of your stomach, but what does that mean? Or a pain in the neck. What does that mean? Right? Something's happening, but we haven't learned yet. As far as I know, there is only one way to really begin to learn how to speak that language, and that is to immerse yourself consciously. So back to that body scan. That's the idea of this kind of inquiry to your body. First, just to notice, right? What is it that you are feeling? Do you feel tension in your neck? That's where I get my tension messages. Do you feel heartburn? That's another tension message people sometimes receive, right? Everybody's different in how they're wired. But the only way to learn how to understand your body's communication is to A, notice it, and B, be curious about it, and think about what it might be trying to tell you. And in that, you can also ask for support, right? You can seek support from your practitioners, from your ministers, from those closest to you, who sometimes observe a lot better what is happening in your body than you do yourself. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. I certainly have. So I'm always grateful for the people in my family who notice, oh, my body posture. I'm bent over with the weight of the world, right? That would be another one of those. But your body is a place where your individual soul is pressing up against the oneness of the divine, that infinite soul. It is the place in space and time where the divine infinite possibilities are expressing themselves in a material way. And so this is a nexus, and it's a very powerful place. One of the other things that can really interfere, I think, or get in the way of this communication is trauma. So sometimes, especially when people, it could be physical trauma, it could be emotional or spiritual trauma, but trauma often creates, or we experience such strong feelings of pain around trauma, feelings that are hard to experience, that sometimes we try to cut them, put them away, or shut ourselves off from those feelings. And when we shut ourselves off from those feelings, we're also shutting ourselves off from the body. And we lose our connection to that intuition. And our bodies usually try to tell us, hey, pay attention here. Something needs your attention. And if we are unable to listen, the body may escalate those signs. And I can share with you, I've had my own experience of that, that ultimately resulted in an autoimmune condition. And the thing that I was very fortunate for in that experience was that after a long period of time trying to get some help with conventional medicine, this is a perfect example of divine guidance. My mom one day heard a Chinese medicine practitioner on the radio, and she said, "You should go see that person." I had never thought about Chinese medicine before. I didn't know a thing about it. But I was desperate enough in my situation to want to get some help. So I went to see this person, and I worked with her for a while. And eventually one day she said, I really think you should be better than you are. I wonder, have you had an experience that was so strong, so difficult, that you've kind of locked it away in the closet of your mind? Because she said when people do that, sometimes, and they won't pay attention to whatever that was, the body will just keep yelling at you and trying to do it through whatever means it can come up with, until you pay attention, until you acknowledge it, and until you work through it. And initially I just thought, what the heck? That just, because I really didn't want to open the door to that closet. But eventually I did. And perhaps not too surprisingly, a lot of my symptoms were resolved after doing that. The body had been talking to me about not just a physical trauma or an emotional trauma, a spiritual trauma. This was a trauma that followed an assault. And I just couldn't hear it. I didn't know how to speak that language. But I started to learn how to speak that language. So I think this is an opportunity that all of us have. There's a really wonderful quote, let's see if I've got this, by Sonia Renee Taylor. She says, when we liberate ourselves from the expectation that we must have all things figured out, we enter a sanctuary of empathy. I love that phrase, sanctuary of empathy. Do you all have everything figured out? I sure don't. But sometimes I feel like I ought to, right? And especially as I've been on this path, aren't ministers supposed to have everything figured out? Help me out here, Reverend Jerry. Yep. The truth. Chop wood, carry water. There you go. Chop wood, carry water, says Reverend Jerry, and indeed. So, all that this means is that as part of this journey of learning about the body, how our bodies can be spiritual instruments, how we can engage with that, it's really essential to offer ourselves grace as we do that, to allow that whole experience to take place in a sanctuary of empathy. Right? Okay. So this brings us to our conclusion, right? Our bodies are individualizations of spirit, and we're so accustomed to dismissing them. But the truth is they are an essential part of our spiritual experience. In our teaching, we identify this spiritual journey as what we are here to do. And so in order to do it in the most productive and powerful way, we need to learn to use all of the tools and resources at our disposal. So whether that is tuning into the body, reading and learning, being in community, using tools like spiritual mind treatment, they're all equally important. And so I hope as we've been talking this morning, you've been able to really think about your body, perhaps in a new way that you haven't really thought about it before. That it is your divine instrument. That Spirit endowed you with this perfect body for you, that is giving you an opportunity to really bring something forward into your own experience and understanding that then you can share with others. Because that's the other part of our teaching, isn't it? It's community. It's how we share our insights, what we learn from each other together. And that's also really important. So just imagine in this moment what shifts, what insights, what ahas might come from really beginning to engage in this body-conscious awareness and contemplation. So I'm going to invite us to do an affirmation together, and then I'm going to close with a treatment. So I just want to invite everybody to stand up, all right? And we're going to do our affirmation 3 times. So we're going to start with the whisper, go to the statement, and then really claim it, okay? So, I listen to my body knowing it is speaking as God. I listen to my body knowing it is speaking as God. I listen to my body knowing it is speaking as God.